Hi, I'm John Persinos, editorial director of Investing Daily and chief investment strategist of Marijuana Profit Alert. Welcome to the latest installment of my Marijuana Insiders interview series. With me today is Anthony Coniglio, president and chief executive officer of NewLake Capital Partners, a cannabis-focused real estate investment trust, or REIT. NewLake owns 31 properties across 12 states, leasing to tenants with cannabis cultivation facilities and dispensaries. NewLake also is a member of the equity portfolio in my publication, Marijuana Profit Alert. Anthony, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited for the discussion.
Absolutely. As the beginning of a new year looms on the calendar, what do you see unfolding as the biggest trends in the cannabis industry in 2023?
John, on this factor, I'm actually a little bit of a contrarian with what I've been hearing a lot of people talk about lately. I actually think 2023 is going to hold potentially some upside surprises from a margin perspective and a profit perspective for some of the operators. And I actually think there'll be less M&A than what many prognosticators are indicating for 2023. Allow me to expand a little bit on that.
Sure.
From an M&A perspective, everybody thinks pricing is going down and people need to combine. And what I worry about from that perspective is you get two underperforming companies that get together and try to make a go of it. Right. I think for those that have survived 2022, I think they're going to be very reticent to take a lot of risk in their portfolio unless acquiring a distressed asset is something that truly is a fill-in from a strategic perspective. But I think you'll see less and less deals. I think you'll see more and more of the companies really trying to drive through that profitability and free cash flow. And I think because of some of the underinvestment in the industry in this 2022, we're going to find that there'll be better profit margins than people expect.
Yeah, that's a phenomenon you see in other industries, that two weak companies think that merging will be some sort of panacea and that they'll magically generate synergies. But often, because they're not complementary or the merger doesn't make strategic sense, what they get is just a weak company that's the combination of two weak companies. Isn't that right?
Yes, exactly right. And I think people underestimate what it really takes to make a merger successful. You don't just put two companies together and magically it gets better. It really is an art. My experience tells me, having done this myself, but having seen it many, many times as a banker, it's a real art to get the merger synergies out of a transaction. And so I think people underestimate how hard it is.
The marijuana industry definitely has tailwinds propelling it forward, especially in 2023. More and more states are legalizing marijuana, obviously. The November 8 midterm elections carried a lot of surprises. One outcome that is directly relevant to our conversation right now is that Maryland and Missouri, two populous states, influential states, legalized recreational marijuana. And when new markets are created, that means new customers, new sales, new profits, and it lifts the share prices of cannabis companies. But bills to lift the federal ban on marijuana in Congress, they remain stymied. Do you think 2023 will finally be the year when we reach that holy grail, so to speak, when Congress finally lifts the federal ban on marijuana, or will that hope prove illusory next year as well?
Well, we were very excited to see Maryland and Missouri approve. In fact, we have a couple of tenants in Missouri, and we think that's terrific for their business, terrific for our portfolio. No, to get to the point, I do not see 2023 being the year. We think it's at least 3 to 5 years out. We had some great progress recently in approving the research bill. I think many in the Senate and also in Congress will want to see the fruits of that legislation. And while it's a terrific step forward, don't get me wrong, terrific step forward, I do think we're going to need to see something come out of that research work before you find a lot of senators lining up to approve legalization. So I think we have to let that play out.
Well, I appreciate your realistic, cold-eyed assessment of the prospects of getting that federal ban lifted. What do you see as the major profit catalyst for marijuana equities in 2023?
Yeah, I think a profit catalyst for the operators is really, I think many of them will bear the fruits of their labor from 2022. What I mean more specifically is that 2022 was a year that, as we all know, had tremendous difficulty for the segment. And so operators really focused on where can they eliminate expense, where can they become more efficient in their operations, and where can they drive more cash flow? How can they rationalize their businesses to focus only on those elements of the business that have some profitability or if not cash flow, a line of sight to cash flow. So I think 2023, by the time we get into the second quarter, I think we're going to see the fruits of those labors. And I think we're going to see, as I started earlier, we're going to see some upside surprises around positive margins and margin improvement because they've worked so hard for the past 9 months to really get those costs under control and to bring out efficiencies in their process.
Related to that, because of the federal ban, many cannabis businesses are denied access to mainstream banking. Bankers are by nature conservative, and they're worried about the ramifications of doing business with cannabis companies when the federal ban is still in place. That has caused a liquidity problem for a lot of marijuana companies. It's gotten better, but for the longest time, marijuana companies have struggled with a cash crunch. So, do you think the cash crunch will get better in 2023, or will it still be an upward climb for a lot of companies to get the liquidity they need?
Yeah, I think this is an absolute depends answer. It depends on SAFE. If SAFE is able to get done, then I do think that will bring in some added capacity on the capital front. I don't think it solves all problems, but I do think there's some added capacity. If SAFE doesn't happen, I don't see it improving very much at all. I just don't see a lot of new capital coming into the sector because I think the real catalyst for valuation, particularly on the equity side for the operators, the real catalyst for valuation is legalization. And so when we go back a couple of minutes ago, if people don't believe that that will happen for at least 3 to 5 years, which is our perspective, then why would they pivot away from some near-term market opportunities away from cannabis to deploy capital? And in fact, I think they'll sit on the sidelines for yet another year, wait till they get closer to the catalyst, take advantage of some of the dislocation in non-cannabis sectors of the market, and then rotate in towards the end of the year or maybe the year after.
We just talked about problematic cash flows. What are some of the other pain points that marijuana entrepreneurs struggle with right now and which they'll continue to struggle with into 2023?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is inflation on the consumer. And so what I've observed in talking with our tenants and more broadly the industry is how the basket size has shrunk and the cannabis consumer has really been impacted by food and energy prices going up so rapidly. And in that adjustment period, they've really modified their behavior on cannabis consumption. Maybe they're still consuming the same, but they're buying less in their basket size. Now, quite frankly, they've benefited in some of these states where we've seen pricing come down significantly, like a California or like a Massachusetts or a Michigan, for that example, for that matter. We see that they're able to buy maybe the same that they were getting before, but for cheaper because those prices have come down so much. So I think that's the biggest issue confronting the operators this year. Will they see inflation away from cannabis temper so that we can get the consumer to have a real steady state purchasing habit?
NewLake Capital Partners is a REIT and specializes in cannabis-related real estate. What trends do you see unfolding next year in marijuana-related real estate?
Yeah, continued demand for real estate capital. The one thing that we know about the cannabis industry that is true across every single state is that it's a capital-intensive industry. It's capital-intensive for dispensaries. It's capital-intensive for cultivation facilities, manufacturing facilities. And so operators want to continue to expand their business from state to state. And so we think there'll continue to be demand for real estate capital. And we're thrilled to be a public company. We're thrilled to have capital available to invest. And so we'll continue to provide capital to the industry for their real estate needs.
Anthony, that was very insightful and useful. Thanks for your time. I enjoyed it.
John, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.